Hello, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everything in between. Cat Kings here again for another fantastic and exciting video. So, what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about the dangers of psychedelics. And I know, there are some gurus out there who would swear that these are perfectly harmless drugs, and then they would go on and on and on about all the benefits. So first of all, with that, I just gotta say, bro, shut the fuck up. Let's talk about it, because it's important. There are definitely plenty of benefits, and promising research that is emerging. And for sure, a lot of people have benefited from psychedelics, myself included. But the problem is that when people are using psychedelics, they have this misconception about how great it's going to be. Like, they're going to trip and it's going to be all cool and oh my god, bro, and I'm going to have a blast. And for some people that can work, but we always hear about all the positives recently, this psychedelic renaissance, and I think that's great and it's important. And in some videos I've talked about psychedelics and how good they've been, but in this one in particular I want to talk about the negative ones. So if you don't like facts, if you don't like those types of things, then I would recommend clicking off. Because what I see a lot of times is people are okay with facts. Hell, people are even okay with believing shit that they don't even research themselves, as long as it just sounds right. They feel it in their gut, and so because they feel it, it must be true. And that's cringe as fuck. So, of course, the first thing that happens with psychedelics is if you ever have psychosis or something, it's going to look a lot like meth psychosis, right? It's going to look a lot like schizophrenia, like a psychotic break if you go into a hospital. And so if you ever end up like that, just be prepared for that. It might be a horrible, horrible trip. But that's the first thing, and first and foremost important. Of course, that sort of segues into this, that there's a real risk of suicide. Because when the trip feels like it's going to last forever, you go into this state of, oh my god, get me out of here, get me out of here. And so you might have like these hands and stuff trying to pull you in and all that shit. And the simple answer is you have to let go. You have to accept that. The more you resist, the worse it becomes. And you keep fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And oh my god, you can say that it's not going to happen to you, but that's because you're sober, you're in the right state of mind, you're calm, everything seems rational, and you can make sense of the world. But when you're in that sort of state and you don't know left from right, it's really terrible. Of course, it's kind of hard to dose properly, especially with stuff like acid, because one tab can be significantly stronger than another. It's happened to me before. I took a couple tabs. I ended up taking a sheet at one point, which was terrible. Highest I've ever been off of that shit. I don't know how long I tripped. I wish I could give you an accurate answer, but I'll tell you this. I had to sleep in for a few days. I remember going to sleep and still wake up the next day, even though I was sobering up. I was not quite all there. And the thing about all that was when it was so hard to get to bed. I remember just laying there just feeling all fucked up, all types of way. Like, it was so hard to get to motherfucking bed. And I remember I finally got to bed, and when I woke up, I was kind of still in a blur, and I wasn't really aware of how fucked up I was until I started really coming to. And that's when I realized, oh my god, I'm still like in a third-person world. Like, it's hard to explain until you do it. And this is the thing, right? For everybody, trips might have similar characteristics, but they're also going to be vastly different from individual to individual. And so you need to be prepared for that and manage your expectations of what could happen and what might happen. And like I said, I had plenty of good trips, but that one trip, sorry, I had to blow my nose. That one trip can really fuck you up. And if it does fuck you up, it can make you an entirely different person, for better or for worse. And so I remember waking up and I had to go do this thing for getting an apartment. I was talking to this lady, and it was just one of those things where it's like, holy shit, like, what do I do now? But of course, it's amazing how quickly you can at least pretend to be sober, or like that you and your mind sober up if you're around a police officer, if you're around like an important business meeting or something. It's amazing how quickly you can just sort of snap out of it like that. So that's one of the things you need to be aware of, is that if you have work the next day, you best not do it, because this is going to last for a while if you're tripping out, like, right? And then also it's important for aftercare too, making sure you properly address this the trip, and if there's any trauma related to it, that's also another thing. And how do you go from here? So, and the other thing, of course, is you need to buy yourself a drug testing kit. Now, these aren't going to be guaranteed to tell you, what isn't your drug, but they're definitely better than just sort of trusting in your dealer. Because at the end of the day, no matter who your dealer is, their goal is a business. Their goal is to maximize profit. Just like with a lot of these food companies, when they have added sugars and shit, like what some food companies will do is they'll say no added sugars, but they'll have and they'll list like the things as 0 grams of sugar. But the only reason they can do that is because they're talking specifically about table sugar, not any other type of sugar. And so you'll see stuff like dextrose or mono or diglycerides, which are forms of sugar, if I remember correctly. And that's just a sneaky way, right? People will look for ways to be really sneaky, or people will look for research chemicals that interact very similar to LSD. So definitely be important to actually look at that. So a great example of a research chemical with like no empirical evidence is 25I-NBOMe. And of course that means, and with shit like that, there's a lot less of a dose for this to die. So, and again, for dealers, it only costs dealers a few cents to $1 per dose to get that. That's a lot cheaper. That's a lot more profit. Here's another really weird fact for you that's kind of scary, is that 4 new research chemicals are introduced every day. So, of course, psychedelics will raise your resting heart rate. So those with a weak heart need to be careful. So if you got like congestive heart failure, heart palpitations, you got high blood pressure, your resting heart rate, your blood pressure, it's all going to go up. And even just not like doing this long term is not a good idea to put that level of stress on you. Just like if you were actually like stressed, like the chemical cortisol is not good for you, so which is why it's important to manage your stress and to manage any other things that are going on in life. Because like if you don't, this can place incredible stress on your heart and lead to premature death. So if you're having these nightmare trips and psychedelics over and over and over again, that added stress is going to not be good for your heart at all. So, as well, some psychedelics don't act well with antidepressants, so you have to keep in mind, for example, if you are taking a psychedelic and then you mix it with, Xanax or anything, or benzos or anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, or fucking pretty much anything. Hell, even blood thinners. Like, you have to be aware of the drug interactions with each chemical and know how they interact. Even if you have that knowledge, we still can't for sure 100% guarantee every single possible side effect. We just don't know. The best form of safety practice is just abstinence and not to do these things altogether. But if you're going to do them, it's probably a good idea to see how they interact with any other medications you're taking. And if you have a history of mental illness in you or your family, this can make schizophrenic states develop at a more rapid rate. So a lot of people, that they'll sort of lie dormant, then they'll have this trip, and then they'll just never come back. They're just not the same person anymore. Which is why, they talk outside and setting, and that's so important. So if you're like, like bad trips or bad trip setters, like this is a big one. You need to make sure you have somebody there who can look out for you and knows what's going on, and prepare yourself a list of, okay, these are the possible side effects, here's what I should expect. So that way, when you're in an altered state, you're not going, oh my God, am I dying? Because you're a lot less likely to listen to reason, especially if you're unprepared then, than if you come into it with a sober mind, and you know the information ahead of time, and then once you start tripping, you just know, okay, well, I learned this, I learned that, I just know I'm okay. You ain't got to know every single reason or detail of why it's safe. You just got to know why. You just got to know that it is safe, relatively speaking. But again, I don't advocate for psychedelics. I think they ruin a lot of lives. I think they also help a lot of people. So it's kind of a risk or reward. You can either have the best life-altering experience, but with psychedelics, you have to get it right every single time. Psychedelics only need to get it right one time, and they can ruin your life. And that's unfortunate. And everybody says it's not going to be them until it's them. So if you're going to do it, you got to understand that these exaggerate and enhance your current mood, which is why setting settings are so important. And again, back to whole, if you're going to use any type of drug that help, like benzos can help kill at least the mental aspects of the experience. And one thing I see a lot is this toxic belief that bad trips are a good thing. And to some extent, perspective is huge, and we definitely know that. So to some extent, your perspective is going to be huge. And it can make the difference between having a positive, life-altering trip or having one that I'm never doing anything again. But what I see specifically is some people will make an excuse and constantly say, they're a great thing, and they don't understand that not always. Sometimes bad trips are bad trips. Sometimes bad trips are not a good thing. Sometimes they really are just that they traumatize you and they leave you with PTSD, and now you have to go through years of therapy to even get to a remote inkling of the person you used to be, because now you're just a shell of that. So sometimes trauma is trauma. Of course, the next thing I would talk about is trip flashbacks, PTSD. For example, I can't smoke weed anymore. I just can't. If I do, I start having racing heart. My blood pressure rises immediately, and I can't talk myself out of it. And it's almost like I can return to that altered state, not quite like of tripping acid or anything, but of going, like feeling all fucked up, feeling just unreasonable. The before and after, I used to smoke weed all the time, smoke massive amounts of weed, just all the time. I'd roll up half-ounce blunts and sit there puffing on that for 45 minutes to an hour straight. And now it's like, if I even so much as take a whiff of weed, I start having bad memories and bad experiences. And so, again, to that previous point of how people will try to, put a positive spin on everything, much so if you're constantly doing psychedelics, let's say recreationally, you might not think that's harming you. But what I found is sometimes people lose enjoyment in their regular sober life. People are like really looking forward. I've seen plenty of people, even with just shit like weed, where it's like they can't be sober, they're just shitty, and they just think out like how badly they want to get home from work and smoke weed, and they miss out. It's like, imagine you fast forward in life to only the good parts, and at the end of your life you tallied up all that time that you fast forwarded and wasted when you could have actually enjoyed it. Because that time is precious, it's invaluable. I've said this a million times, I'll say it a million times again, I'll never shut the fuck up about it. It's a non-refundable currency that is at its most valuable right now when you're young and healthy. And these drugs don't give a fuck about you. These drugs are not going to be there for you on your deathbed. They're just not there. They're not your family, not your friends. They're not your loved ones. They're not your career. They're not your 401k. They're not any of that. And some of you guys out there, fuck all these other reasons, right? But let's just look at it from purely a financial standpoint. A lot of you ain't even got money to be spending like that. I know dudes who waste 30% or more of their paycheck just on weed alone. And it's like, do you really want to be broke? You really want to be broke? I mean, of course, the most obvious answer is no, you don't. But dudes will really be like spending their fucking money on that shit, and they don't think about all the money they could save. A good example is how much money could you save on if you stopped smoking cigarettes every single day. Even if it's just a pack a day, let's say a regular pack, we'll just say like a premium pack is $7, right? And so you say, I don't know, well, that's $7. Let's not do tax. Let's just say 7 times 7. That's what, $49 a week. And then let's say, what is that? By 4, 200 minus 4, 196. Yeah, that's $196 you save every fucking month. If we just say $7 for a premium pack, just 1 pack a day. Some people are smoking 2, 2.5, 3 packs a day. That's fucking expensive. Now you take that if you're doing acid every day or even just every week. It's like, if that's really what you want to do, then fine. But you need to have the money like that. You shouldn't be sitting here and if a $500 emergency expense comes up, you're fucked. I know so many people who, and don't get me wrong, cost of living is expensive. And it's not like we should have to micromanage every aspect of our life. But we definitely need to have like these important things and shit come first. Because like, if you don't, you're going to feel miserable. And what happens is people will spend all this money and then later they have to really micromanage their money. They're counting every penny. They're counting every nickel, dime, quarter, dollar. And for what? Just to repeat the cycle again next paycheck? You go out there, blow out your paycheck, and now you gotta do it all over again? How is that living life? How is that anything besides struggling? How is that anything besides fucking cringe and stupid? Being broke is cringe, dude. I don't want to do that. And yet, I knew plenty of dudes who that's all that mattered to them. You're literally burning away your money, especially if you're just smoking ounces every day. I don't understand how that's fucking cool to somebody. It's not like it's healthy for you either if you're constantly doing these things chronically. Even just eating edibles themselves, it's not like they're perfectly safe. Obviously, nothing is perfectly safe. I'm just saying, people will sometimes argue, well, it's not like alcohol or that does more damage or whatever. And the argument for that is, yes, exactly. We're not talking about that though. And to that point, yeah, I wouldn't do that either. It's supposed to be an occasional enjoyment and treat, not just physically, but psychologically for yourself. You just won't enjoy life as much. How your baseline becomes miserable, and now when you used to be able to tolerate being sober, now you can't even stand the thought of it. And you're so zonked out that you're not even in the same world as everybody else. And of course, that leads to the next point of the spiritual awakening. It can feel really good. However, when you tend to have that spiritual awakening, it can also be very lonely. Because when you're trying to explain it to somebody who's never had it, it's really hard to put it into words. I always like to look at like 3 systems of filtration. There's what you can think, what you can put into words, and then what is interpreted by the other individual, what they understand it to be. So, even if you somehow are able to say it, there is no better teacher than first-hand experience. People can try their best. It's not going to be as easy as you think. So that can be extremely lonely, and you can come across as being kind of fucking nutty and cringy to other people. So, what do we do? What do we do? Well, I think the other thing I find is you need to be honest with yourself, because what happens is there's rationalization for continuing to use. On top of that, you can sometimes end up with friends who aren't really friends, so just kind of friends of common interest using drugs. For example, high school was one of the best things that you ever got that experience with. You go and hang out with all these people, but you're not really hanging out. You guys don't really talk about anything outside of the surface level. You don't really make any efforts to see each other at each other's houses. It's just you happen to gather together at this school, because you're both at the school, you're hanging out. You wouldn't do it outside of it. And once that common grounds, those friends of circumstance, once that same circumstance that brings you together is no longer there, it's over. You see it all the time where people graduate high school and 99% of the people they used to talk to, they don't talk to anymore. They're just not close to like that anymore. It's not anything personal. People just tend to change. They grow apart. And you need to have more than just psychedelics. That can't be the only thing that draws you together. Of course, people will argue that they use it for therapy and they use it to meditate. But there's other ways. Some great other ways to meditate and that are therapeutic are yoga, meditation, prayer, helping others, volunteering, being in nature, raising animals or children, a support system of people, therapy, and exercise, which are all much safer, much more effective, especially stuff like exercise. There's two things that doctors usually look for when they're treating a patient. They look for improving the expectancy of the life and improving the quality of the life with as little risk as possible. And so you have to manage all that together. And there is no medications that we currently know of that do both and is relatively risk-free. Exercise does both. And not only is it relatively risk-free, it's in fact extremely beneficial for you. Speaking for myself with some anecdotal evidence, I run for anxiety because it lets me know my heart is still good. Whenever I'm worried about my heart or my lungs, if I can work out, it's a clear indication that, hey, you're in fact very healthy. There's nothing to worry about. It's also great because it lets you know, it's one of the first things that let you know if you do have something wrong with you. It's going to be hard to tell if you have a heart problem if you're constantly living in a sedentary lifestyle and you're doing nothing, because your heart doesn't have to work hard at all. However, if you're exercising, it's going to be a lot easier to detect that due to the added strain and workload and demands from your heart. So, again, to those points, anecdotes are not bad. In fact, it can be great to share the stories, especially if they're repeatable. The problem is that they should be used with a grain of salt. Even my stories of anecdotes. The biggest reason is because what works for you is not going to work for another. What's one man's trash is another man's treasure, and vice versa. Just because you have great experiences with psychedelics does not mean that other people are going to have those great experiences. And you might also just, again, rationalize or delude yourself into believing the experiences you have are great, when really you might just be zonked down in a corner for 16 hours of the day until eventually you pass the fuck out, or you end up staying up all night because you're wired, and you might somehow convince yourself that that's a good thing. I, on the very extreme end, knew people who would smoke meth and they would somehow convince themselves that they were being more productive, when really they would just sit there and watch porn all fucking day long and beat their dick until it looked like what was it? That one Splinter episode of SpongeBob? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, with his fucking finger, until it looks like something like that. And so it's disgusting how people will do that, but they'll convince themselves that what they're doing is in fact a positive thing to their life. And it can be really hard because you're so wonked out of your mind, you're not looking at it objectively, and then other people are looking at you going, oh my god, what the hell? And it can almost feel like more important than eating or drinking water. You might not think about it, but you might end up stealing from your fucking mother, or your father, or your best friend. You feel bad, of course. The feeling to hit that craving is so much more important. You might miss out on hanging out with friends or going out and doing stuff. And that's not fun at all, dude. So, there's plenty of other things to cover, but I didn't want to make this like a super long video. Essentially what I'm just telling you is maybe actually go to therapy if you're dealing with trauma instead of using psychedelics. And if you're going to use psychedelics, then it should be at the advisory of a therapist, of a shaman, or somebody who knows what they're doing. Even with shamans, it's like, I don't know so much about them because there's so much more to drugs on the psychology side that shamans might not exactly know what the fuck they're doing. If you're having a nightmare trip, you need to be around people who are going to be able to handle it. I think a licensed professional is probably your best bet. Just because, well, they have the knowledge. They're trained for this type of stuff and how to handle it. It's going to be really bad if you end up around people who are convinced themselves that, yeah, it's just not going to happen to you. And then all hands on board, nobody knows what to do. Imagine if somebody had a heart attack and nobody knew how to do CPR. Oh, God. That's fucking a nightmare right there. So you need to be around people who actually know what the fuck they're doing and how to handle those situations, not just dude bros who are like, yeah, man, totally wonked out. And can I say don't do it? I'm never going to do anything like that. And the biggest reason I'm not going to do it is, again, the trauma it caused me and how I've had to work, and I'm still working on it from years ago. And, of course, if I was zonked out of my mind, let's say I'm really tripping, I'm not going to be able to go and drive anywhere. Let's say a friend needed me for any type of reason. I'm not going to be able to go and help them. I'm not going to be able to be there for them. I'm not going to be able to do any of that. You might convince yourself, yeah, I'll drive. How many drunks convince themselves they'll drive? And so you go drive and you're wonked out of your mind and you get a ticket or something, or you get put in jail for it because you were driving under the influence. Now you have a record and you can't get a good job, or God forbid you end up crashing into somebody's vehicle and you just ended up manslaughtering a bunch of people, women, children. It's just not for me, bro. I like to be in control of my mind. I like to be in a state where, it's why I don't drink, because I don't want to be in a state where I can't fucking, at the drop of a hat, be able to go and do shit, or be able to take calls, or be able to go into work if I need to pick up some extra hours or whatever. I like to be in control of this life, and I like this reality. You need to learn how to deal with the real world, not run away from it.